The storm passed just east of Tampa Bay. The area avoided a direct hit, but some places are dealing with flooding. David Begnaud is in downtown Tampa. David, good morning.
Nora, good morning. The flooding is not severe. In fact, the water not far from me is above flood stage, but it hasn't gotten onto the street. The real story here is what could have been. The curfew's been lifted. People are back out on the road now. The mayor of Tampa says instead of a punch in the face, they got a glancing blow. You might be sitting at home saying, but wait a minute, you guys told me it was going to be the worst. Here's what happened. The storm, as it got north of Fort Myers, started to march to the northeast ever so slightly, putting Tampa on the west side, the best side, if there is a best side for a hurricane. So essentially, there was no direct hit, diminishing the real threat. So that's why you woke up this morning. There really was nothing in the street that was a major hazard. There were no injuries reported, no significant deaths. And that's why when the mayor woke up, he said by 8 a.m., you guys are free and clear. The city of Tampa is open again.
And this is the first time we have been able to get our boots on the ground in one of these devastated islands, and the destruction to St. Thomas is massive. Hurricane Irma ripping through there as a Category 5, damaging almost every structure we saw, leaving people without power, drinking water, and growing increasingly desperate.
This morning, our first look at the devastation in the U.S. Virgin Islands from the ground.
It's going to be a little rough on the way over.
This U.S. Coast Guard team is doing an aid drop here in St. Thomas, bringing everything from generators to food, water, clothing, and law enforcement personnel to help with the security situation here.
As we drove through the streets, utility poles and power lines downed everywhere. Trees stripped bare.
This once green, lush landscape now looks like this. Dead trees everywhere and debris like this overturned car.
Windows blown out, roofs ripped off, buildings crumbling under Irma's force.
We're inside a church here in St. Thomas. Just look what Irma did to it. That was the altar. The entire front of the building gone.
Tourists and residents desperate to get off the island. But with the airport destroyed, the only way off is by boat.
I've been told that there's a couple of cruise ships coming in tomorrow that are taking people to Puerto Rico.
Government planes and choppers landing only for emergency evacuations and to drop off personnel and supplies. While we were on the island, police responding to looters attempting to raid a shipping container. A curfew in place between 6 p.m. and noon. Some of the 1,200 tourists so far evacuated from St. Martin by the National Guard, telling us about the dangers that emerge after the storm. Maureen Puckerin saying robbers wielding long swords invaded her hotel.
They started stealing food from our fridge, and then they beat up one tourist, hit a lady in the eye, and then they robbed the bank down the block and ran into our compound.
Of course, some of the looting is just people getting what they need to survive, but clearly criminals are taking advantage of this situation. It's becoming a very big problem. Today, with Hurricane Jose out of this area, the U.S. military resumes trying to evacuate the thousands of Americans that remain stranded. Robin?
All right, Lindsay, and we got to keep in mind these smaller islands that were really impacted, devastated by Irma.
Yeah, beyond impacted, leveled in many places.